the other hand, and we also see marks like this, which can represent what that particular warrior had done in previous battles, either by counting coup or killing someone. These are bullets. Sometimes the pictures or the ledger books themselves were worn inside the shirt and were thought to have protective properties. So there are some that exist that actually have bullet holes in them. Let's see, all kinds of things, but look at the detail in the horse. These are people who really knew the animals. They really knew the horses in their care. So you see the hooves, the fetlocks, all of the joints. The tail was wrapped with a red trade cloth to keep it out of the way during battle, but it was also in a ceremonial preparation for battle as well. Let's see, I know. This is, what do you think that might be? Any ideas? What could it represent? That would be an indication of either a kill or somebody wounded on the other side. And sometimes you'll see them in red and sometimes black, like this. Here's a detail. Here you can also see the bridle. This is actually an indication that the Cheyennes were great trading partners with the Diné or Navajo people to the south who were skilled in making silver bridles. I think there we go. So here's an example of a, there we go. Here's an example of a Navajo made silver bridle from that period, and you can see here that it has the cross pieces exactly. This one does. So we learn other things from these drawings, besides just happen to be interesting to look at. Here's another one, again, battle, touching or counting coup. By being able to count coup a certain number of times could raise the status of a warrior within his warrior society. There were, let me think here. So they're mostly executed in pencil. They're graphically bold in a clear style with lots of linear flat detail that we see. More than one scholar has, in fact, described them as literature in a sense because they are so legible. Off track here. So they're intended to record events, to record histories of what happened, and they were held to account when they were being made. There was, they were meant to tell truths. They would get together. Sometimes more than one person would be drawing on the same drawing or in the same drawing book or ledger book. Not always, but sometimes. There was one graduate student who presented a paper that was trying to make the argument that ledger drawings should come under the Native American Graves and Repatriation Act. That is, they should be returned to their original communities. But because they're not considered to be objects that are religious or have cultural patrimony that is used by the entire community, they don't fall under that jurisdiction. But he was trying to make the argument that because more than one hand is in some of these drawings, he was trying to make the argument that they are communal in how they were created. So let's think a little little bit about the warrior societies that these men were in. Within each community, they were considered the peacekeeping groups that ensured the safety and welfare of their villages. They were in charge of maintaining discipline within the tribe. They were in charge of overseeing tribal hunts and ceremonies and providing military leadership. Each had a head man and its own song. So you'd have elders in these societies and also a lot of young men. The Cheyennes had 6 such warrior societies. The Swift Fox Society, the Coyote Warrior Society, the Elk Warrior Society, the Shield Warrior Society, and the Bowstring Warrior Society, the Dog Warrior Society. That's a little confusing because the term dog soldiers or dog warriors was used in multiple ways throughout that period in application to various tribes. The Kiowas had 6 warrior societies known collectively by others in the community as the dog soldiers, so there's another use of that term. But they had several others, the Rabbit Warrior Society, the Ohoma Warrior Society, and so on and so on. And I think they've added some over the years. I actually know someone who was in one of these societies in the Southern Cheyenne tribe today. And it wasn't one that existed during this time. So what would happen is that when the day was done, the young men drew pictures of what happened to them and their friends, and what they accomplished and the ways in which they were brave. As curator Joe Horsecapture related with his dry humor, he said, I'd like to think of these guys sitting around the campfire talking about what they did. Kind of like young men today who get together drinking beer and talking about girls, hunting with their brothers, or winning a football game. But I will add, he's a fun guy here. But I will add here what these men did, engaging with enemies, hunting massive bison, involved great physical danger and great athleticism as well. So as delightful as the drawings can be to our 21st century eyes, we need to understand the profound seriousness of the dangers that these warrior artists faced in their actual lived experiences. Some of the drawings, if you have an intact book, and many of these have been torn apart, collectors in galleries in Santa Fe, there are a lot of collectors who would like to have these. And they take if they can get one of these books, they take the pages out, they sell them one by one, which is really a tragedy. So they're spread in collections and in private hands throughout the country where they exist. So it's really remarkable to have one that actually is still intact. This is one that's in the Newberry Library in Chicago, and it is still intact, which is wonderful. It's also Southern Cheyenne. And the wonderful thing about seeing it intact is that there is a narrative that goes from page to page to page, and you can see in the horse's footprints how they wind around. So there's an entire story about what happened that day, or maybe in a successive day. And sometimes toward the back of the book, there'd be another artist telling a story. So in this case, it says stampeding horses, but this was another practice that was considered to be brave, is to go to the enemy's camp and take their horses, to capture their horses. So that was one of the men. My guess is that these horses were probably army horses, judging by the saddles that are on them. So again, there's a lot that's legible there. And I think you've already seen between the one I just showed you a moment ago and these, that there are varying degrees of skill in creating these drawings. Another one that they're taking horses. Sometimes you'll actually see army friends on the horses, or mules. Oftentimes you see mules. I think this one that's yellow is probably a mule. Again, you see the name glyph and the number and the lines. Sometimes these pages are covered with lists of supplies and things like that, but they just drew right over on top of them. Okay, so you see the dispatching of enemies, or no, I'm sorry, this one, I don't know that he's being killed. What do you think? I think he's counting coup. It looks like he's just touching with the lance. Sometimes there were pictures of girls, ladies that had caught their fancy, or maybe relatives in the community. Howling Wolf, another Southern Cheyenne artist, warrior artist, had a very different style from the ones that I have just shown you. Instead of broad action, his are very vertical in their presentation, but also still filled with lots and lots of detail. And we have to keep in mind that the supplies, the pigments they were using were crayons, not in our sense, but as they existed at that time, colored pencils, sometimes ink, but mostly pencil of some kind. I'll quote Edgar Heathworth, an Oklahoma-based professor who is Southern Cheyenne. He's a very renowned mixed media artist, does a lot of conceptual work, a lot of installation work. And he's a very strong advocate for indigenous communities and social justice through the art that he does. So I like to think about the word warrior as many contemporary Native American artists think about it today. They think of themselves as warrior artists, depending on what it is that they are producing. And I'll show you some after a little while. Go to some contemporary works. He describes himself as a warrior artist, speaking of the massacres at Sand Creek and Washita, in which many Cheyenne and some Kiowa were killed, innocent men and women and children. They were peaceful. These events happened in the 1860s. He says, we have to understand how vicious it was and how it was terrorism. You know, they killed children. They pushed the people into a stationary position by treaty. They attacked them in winter when they couldn't be very mobile, and built a fort to supply Custer so he could kill the Cheyenne. A very, very horrible, typical violent episode in American history. Custer, we know him from his last stand, but he was active in earlier massacres in the late 1860s. So I'd like to bring us to archives, the notion of archives and what they can do for us today, and what we can do by going into the archives. The acquisition of Native American objects has a very long and jaded history in terms of being collected by white people and bodies as well. The army surgeons were instructed to bring back skulls, many of which ended up at the Smithsonian. There are so a lot of museums today are struggling with sometimes even being able to know which communities produce the objects that they have. And they need help in having people who are knowledgeable to go in and help them understand what it is they actually have. Do these things fall under NAGPRA? Should they be sent back to their original communities or not? So I like to think of archivists in a sense as a kind of warrior class, certainly not one that involves any physical danger. But I would like to remind us that during the 1970s, when the American Indian movement was becoming solidified, there was no Native American museum on the Smithsonian Mall, and most of the objects, Native American objects, were housed in the Museum of Natural History or Anthropology. And Native communities didn't know what was there. And it was because of the American Indian movement that there was a push to make these collections open to Native people so they could go in and see parts of their own history that had been stolen from them. Not long ago, Dartmouth College, which was an institution originally founded in 1769, actually to educate Native Americans, it hosted a program whereby scholars wrote in to look at a collection they had just received from a collector in Santa Fe. This man had been collecting. He was not Native, he was a white collector, but he believed strongly that these pictures should be seen by a wider public. Part of the bequeathment involved not only giving these 100, I think it was about 160 leisure drawings, the largest collection outside the Smithsonian, but he wanted a book to be made so people would know more about these drawings, so they could see these drawings. He also wanted scholars to try to understand them better. So I was lucky to have been able to be part of this. I believe there were 10 or 12 of us all together, some Native, some non-Native, and we created a book out of it. It was a number of essays. But it was important that we all worked together because some of us knew some things, some of us knew other things. Like the pictures I just showed you, and one of them actually was in this collection, they involved, they were typical drawings like the ones I had just shown you. So the problem was that the information that came in with them was sketchy. We didn't know if it was accurate or not, so we had to research as best we could the archives to find out. I ended up becoming interested in one particular artist in the collection. His name was Nohunawa. He was Southern Cheyenne, which translates to chief killer. It doesn't mean he killed a chief, it just means his name was translated to chief killer. He ended up at Fort Marion Prison at the end of what the so-called Buffalo Wars. He had been gobbled up along with about 70 some other members of the Southern Cheyennes and the Kiowas. Ended up in prison. They shipped them by train to Fort Marion, which is in St. Augustine, Florida. So this is just one picture of some of them alongside one of the women who's brought from town to teach them English and writing. So what I found was that what he made, there we go, became quite different from the drawings he'd been doing before. So we don't get the pictures of warfare. Why? He was in prison. Pictures of warfare is what happened, what got him into prison in the first place. So he was being smart. But going to Florida opened a whole new world to him. They came under the tutelage of the warden, one Henry Pratt, who was famous for the phrase, "Kill the Indian, save the man." He believed that through white education, through assimilation, you could give people a chance to survive in white society. And we all know that that was wrong, but that was his purpose in trying to educate the men that he had there. So they eventually, they were there for 3 years, and they eventually were able to actually go into town, wander around town, do various things. They got to see a lot. So this really changed Chief Keller's way of making art. He starts making landscape pictures, which you really don't see in the earlier ledger drawings. You'll also notice there aren't any lines. Pratt gave them actual sketchbooks with unlined paper. So here you see the lighthouse, the sea, some sand dunes, and the town. Over here, this is the fort. So he got to leave, come back, and got to see ships, which he didn't see on the Western plains. I'll just run through some of the ones that. So this is something else that he did. So he started drawing, like many of the other artists who were there, the warrior artists, they started drawing some of their fond memories because they couldn't draw pictures of war. So here we have two nicely dressed gentlemen and their lady friends, maybe their wives, so that was apparently a nice memory. Buffalo hunting, okay. And then I came upon this one, which is totally landscape. But it doesn't look like the kind of landscape paintings that European Americans were making. So it really made me wonder, okay, what's going on here? How is he understanding landscape? This was, I believe, a picture of Fort Supply, which actually, no, I'm sorry, Fort Sill. And you see a river. There we go. You see a river running through it, and the fort here with the American flag. But it's kind of topsy-turvy. We have hills going this way with the trees sticking out the sides, and then over here they're sticking out the sides. It's almost like a stubble chin, if you think I like to think of it that way. So, but I'm wondering, you know, it doesn't seem anything like European American landscape paintings that have a one-point perspective. So again, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Same thing here. We have a picture of Mexican traders crossing the mountains. And what was really curious was that he kept putting this little figure on the right here, which is actually up here, looking through binoculars, spying on Mexicans coming over the ridge. Another picture, we have, again, kind of a topsy-turvy landscape. We have it all thrust forward, it's very flat. But we have some sense of directionality. We have hoof prints going back behind the hills here, and so somebody is back there. We have, these are Ute wiki-ups, and they're horses, but why are the horses on their sides? It's very curious, and he's got this little figure, once again, spying on the people there.
Can you just use the keyboard to advance?
Up there. The drawer on the thing, pull that out and the keyboard. Pretty crap.
Nope. Not working. That's also right.
Yeah, crap.
but I decided to just speak casually instead. There we go. All right. Okay, so, there we go. So the same kind of thing here. He has memories of hunting, and we see in detail, there he is again, this time taking aim at some deer. And there's a deer calf that he's owning. And they'll always see cougar attacking a buffalo. So these are really good memories for him at this point in time. He's in prison, so these make a big difference for him. There we go. And another one, he does pictures of visits up north to Sioux villages. They have a relationship with one another. So these are some things that, for those who know, for those who are in these communities, they can pick out some of these things that are happening in these pictures. And each of the teepees would have been decorated with some kind of marking or picture or symbol that would have identified whose teepee it was. This is a picture of one of the teachers. This is a picture that Chief Keller drew of the school classroom at the prison. We have words at the top, and interestingly enough, the word God is in there, not surprisingly. There were maps in the room. They attempted to teach the students, or prisoners, about their own geography, as if they didn't know what their own homelands looked like. So, going back to the landscape, the pictures he did that feature landforms, I came across this particular map, which was made by a Comanche by the name of Black Goose, chief at the time. And he needed something to show that in a legal case, during the time of allotment, which would have shrunk the reservation land they already had, he was trying to fight this case with the U.S. government. And so he needed to prove that they had been there in this entire area that's depicted here. And so he depicts in various forms and places, figures, things that had happened in the area to show his knowledge of everything that was contained in this region that he wanted to claim as being Kiowa homeland. There's a river running at the top. You can see, I think I might have a close up in here. Let's see. Yeah. But again, we get it's more like a trail map that you would turn as you're walking, rather than the mathematical kind of maps that we use in Euro-American culture. And this is very much akin to what Chief Keller was doing in his pictures. You have to turn them in order to see all of the various elements right side up. So the same thing happens in this map. We see a goat, I believe it's a goat here, upside down. If you turn it, it's right side up. We get mountain features with like little stubble chin, probably trees sticking out. Again, they're not in any way like a mathematically produced map or one from perspective or anything that Euro-Americans would be accustomed to. So you'll see here's another animal. There are indications, I think this is a tree on which offerings have been attached. So I came to the conclusion that this is what was, this was the kind of worldview having to do with space and geography that Chief Keller was thinking about when he was making his drawings that had to do with teenagers. There's another archive that has a lot of Native American objects. It is the Harvard Peabody Essex Museum of Archaeology. They have objects that go back to Lewis and Clark, and they predate they predate museums in America completely, but they all ended up back on the East Coast, all these objects. They have been really good, the curators there have been really good about inviting scholars to come in and help them understand what these objects are that they have. A lot of them didn't come in with any kind of label or mislabeled. Some of them were labeled in ways that we don't understand today. So, you know, when you're talking about at the time of Thomas Jefferson, and very, very few white people had been out in the West. So they do programs from year to year in which they invite graduate students and others to come in. And I was, again, fortunate enough to be part of a workshop there, and they gave each of us an object to work on. This was the one that they gave me, and I'm thinking, okay, definitely Western Plains, definitely Cheyenne. It came in a box to them marked, I think it was marked Pueblo. It's a box of southwestern objects. Clearly it's not. But I'm asking myself, wait a minute, Cheyenne peoples did not do ceramics. It's a ceramic plate. They didn't do ceramics. They moved around a lot. Ceramics wouldn't work. It would get broken. So baskets were usually, and high carriers were more common. It also has some geometric designs that would be more the province of what women in the Cheyenne community would have done. In fact, I matched some of them to a woman's park flash or a container, the designs there. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, how did this thing end up in a box marked Southwest or Pueblo? As it turns out, it was donated by a woman called Mary Hemingway, not related to Ernest Hemingway. She was the widow, very rich widow in Boston. Her husband had been a businessman, a millionaire for the time, called the Sugar King. And she took it upon her, after he died, she took it upon her to champion causes like women's gymnastics, or women's education for people of color. And she had ended up at Hampton Institute, which had was not only founded to educate African American people, but also ended up having a number of Native American students there as well. Bearsheart happened to have been in the same warrior society as Chief Killer. They were friends. After they were released, he decided he wanted to go on and further his education, so he enrolled at Hampton. And in fact, he was asked to give the commencement speech the year that Mary Hemingway happened to be there. Yeah, and so, and I think the president of the United States was there. So after such an inauspicious time in prison, and having survived everything he went through out on the Western Plains, starving, amongst other things, and he ends up at Hampton Institute. We don't know exactly if he did this slate, and we don't know if he did it in prison or if he did it at Hampton Institute. Pratt at Fort Marion Prison encouraged the men to do a lot of artwork. At first they couldn't speak English, of course, and he thought it was a good way for them to express themselves while they were there. They also made money. They sold to tourists, believe it or not. That was kind of the birth of the Florida tourism. People, were starting to go to St. Augustine. And just to back up, Chief Killer actually went home He and a lot of the prisoners went back to Darlington Agency in Oklahoma. Their families were really happy to see them, of course. But they didn't find a lot of opportunity when they got back because obviously the conditions on the reservation were very, very poor. Food was not good. He did have a family, but he liked the idea that he had gotten an education. He saw that it was a way that he could survive, help his family survive. He sent his daughter Maud to Carlisle Institute, which had just opened up right after the men left prison. Colonel Pratt opened up Carlisle Indian Industrial School in former Army barracks in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And some of the men went there afterwards. So this is a picture of some of the Native American men who have ended up at Hampton Institute. Bearsheart is pictured right there. Unfortunately, Bearsheart was not as fortunate as Chief Keller, who lived to an old age. He unfortunately caught an illness that killed him. I think he'd gone up to work on a farm somewhere in New England, and that's where he caught it. So that's unfortunate. Some of the men after prison actually went up to Carlisle Institute to help teach students there. And you see the evidence of it on the blackboard here. And I did go to Carlisle, and I saw some of the student drawings from this period, the 1870s, 1880s. And they're filled with the same kinds of pictures that we see in the ledger drawings. So you see the influence of these former prisoners on the young students who have been brought from all over the country. So you even see non-Great Plains Indian students there, Diné and others, making pictures like they had been buffalo hunting and riding horses on the Great Plains because some of the teachers came from Fort Marion Prison to work there. Now, what I'd like to do now is to look at some of our contemporary artists today who think of themselves as warrior artists. They see their art as a means through which they can be activists in advocating for indigenous rights, not only in this country but around the world. I'll catch up with myself here. Terence Warnke is one of these artists. He calls himself a warrior artist. He takes the form of ledger art. He takes antique pages of anything from land grant forms, supply forms, anything he can find that is relevant to his people's experience. On this one, we just see train tickets. And we've got a train it looks very much like Chief Keller's train. And the horses are very similar, stylized. Uses brighter colors because the colors are available today that didn't exist for the Cheyennes in the 1860s. All right here. Dwayne Wilcox uses humor to speak about current issues. Here we have the last iceberg, and you see an ice cube on the floor. So he's obviously talking about, he's referring to global warming, obviously. But he's using a ledger, a piece of ledger paper to do it, and the stylized look of the former ledger artist. He's very, very nice man. This is another one of his, From Here to Eternity, in which he divides the ledger paper in 4 pieces, and he is championing here the active participation of Native American people in the U.S. military. I once read that out of all the different ethnic groups in our country, per capita, Native American men and women enter the military in greater numbers than any other ethnic group in our country. This is work by Jim Yellowhawk, Cheyenne River Sioux. Right now he is in New Zealand, and there has been amongst groups, say indigenous peoples around the world, the idea of global indigeneity, because there have indigenous peoples around the world have experienced many similar things, such as forced boarding school enrollment, oppression, resources, the violence, the theft of land. So a lot of issues are similar, and the Maori and peoples in New Zealand experience the same thing. So anyway, Jim is there now, and again, he's doing this on ledger paper. He does a lot of ledger work, and we see a Maori's totem symbol on the left. He's honoring both a Maori friend's grandfather and his own grandfather, both of whom had fought in World War II. So again, championing the idea that art can be a form of resistance and advocation for advocacy. There's another one of his. He loves motorcycles, and you can go to his Facebook page. He's got motorcycles all the time on here. So here he's got the original Tatankarung, and did you notice that all of the figures in these in the old ledger drawings all went from right to left? Yeah, I have been trying so hard over the years to figure out why they chose that. I've asked Cheyenne artists, I've asked other people, and they came to the conclusion that power was seen from the right. And so the power goes from right to left. So the figures on the right are acting upon the figures on the left. So you see a hunter on the right, buffalo on the left, for example. Jim Yellowhawk and a number of other artists, and this has only been in the last 20, 25 years that contemporary Native American artists have taken up this idea that ledger, using ledger art as a reference is a wonderful medium for their own current expression, a kind of a reclamation of history, a reclamation of sovereignty over one's identity. Some of them have branched into commercial areas. The internet has been great for that. So you see there's actually a line of eyeglasses that you can buy that have some of his later work on the temple pieces. Oh, he's also turned all of the buffalo going the other way. So resistance. Not going to be pushed west, we're going to be pushed east. And we're going to push them back east. Fashion design. Again, commercial, but also fine art. These two artists, Laura Shepard is Seneca, so she's not native from the Western Plains, but she collaborates with Dallin Mabey, who is Northern Arapaho. And so we have these painted images on the corset of this dress. You get a buffalo going left, and some symbols that come from ledger art. Rhonda Holybear, her work is amazing. She has two works in the Chicago Art Institute. She's a friend of mine, and she's in her 60s now, but she kind of waited all her life making these just exquisite figures. They stand about, let's say about this tall, and she has exhibited in quite a few museums. She takes the tiniest of beads And of course, beading was traditionally a woman's medium. And uses ledger drawings, all in beads. If you saw these, it would blow your mind. So you can see exactly what I've just shown you in the drawings right here. Underneath the skirt, the outer skirt, there is a hide piece of skirt underneath. I think she uses like a fine deer skin, a fawn skin. And she painted ledger drawings on that underskirt. So, I mean, it's just, the entire piece is so meaningful. This is supposed to be her great-grandmother, who actually was a child on the Battle of Greasy Grass, or Battle of Custer's Last Stand. She was pulled aside by an auntie, and she survived. And her husband was a warrior, and when he died, she became the widow of a warrior, thereby gaining the privilege of being a warrior woman. So she carries a knife on one side. I'm not keeping track of the time, so I'm almost at the end. So it's just another view. Terry Greaves also has taken up the idea of warrior art. Also, she's also a prolific bead artist. Her mother had a trader. Her mother, Kiowa, had a trader post on the Wind River Reservation, and she's another one. I mean, she'd be wonderful to have come and talk to you all. She loves to talk to students. So again, the idea of ledger work. This is another one of her pieces, and so I've shown you some things done by contemporary artists that have some right humor attached to them. But a lot of these are also deadly serious. This is here she is in her works. This is entirely beaded. There's Terry up there. This piece she calls "She Loved Her People," and this is a story. It gives me goosebumps. This is a story that was handed down from her great-grandmother to her grandmother to her mother to her about a 16-year-old girl who happened to be at the Sand Creek massacre. She saw men and women and children being innocently being killed. And she saw one man, a U.S. Army soldier, take a woman who was pregnant and slice open her belly and take out the child. And it sat with her for many, many years. We're talking about the 1860s. 10 years later, Battle of Custer's Last Stand, Battle of Little Big Horn, Battle of Greasy Grass. She's there, and she finds that same soldier. She's finding he's dead, but she takes her knife and she slices him from pubic bone to his neck in retribution and revenge, or avenge, I should say. So this oppression, this violence was deadly serious. And we can look at these drawings and think, you know, they're quaint, they're in some ways very delightful, but these are about people who went through very, very difficult circumstances. So I'm going to leave you with that. I thank you for being so patient about the technology and everything. And I would encourage any of you, especially those of you who are native, to look into some of these programs in museums. There are a lot of misidentified objects in a lot of these archives, and they could really use your help in knowing more about what they have. And there are things, of course, that need to be returned to the communities. So, thank you for being so patient.
Thank you.